Welcome to How Do They Afford That, the podcast that peeks into the financial lives of everyday Australians. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a writer and co-host of the Fear and Greed Business News podcast. As always, I'm with Canna Campbell, financial planner and founder of Sugar Mama TV, which is a financial literacy platform. You'll see it on YouTube and Instagram and podcasts and books and pretty much everywhere. Hello, Canna.
Good morning, Michael. Can I just share this really important, very juicy savings or really side hustle hack with you?
You were jumping out of your skin.
I know. I just get. I'm actually dribbling. I'm so excited. That is a
salivating
disturbing problem.
Salivating at the thought of the savings. Go on. What's your savings hack?
Well, it's a big shout out to Bernice, who DM'd me through Instagram. And she shared with me her side hustle, and it's really good. Mm-hmm. So her and her husband host international students, and they get $50 per day per student. And this money is considered board, so it is legally tax-free money.
Okay, that's good.
So if you have, say, 2 spare bedrooms in your home, and this is something particularly relevant for empty nesters that are approaching retirement, there's potentially $700 cash per week sitting in your house.
Do you have to feed them?
You do. So that's obviously why it's considered like board and tax-free. But as she was telling me, I remembered Tom was telling me his parents always did this. And he loved it because they grew up in a very small country town and they met people from all different walks of life, all different cultures and backgrounds, and it really was it shaped who he is today, and it has enriched his life.
I thought you were about to say, as she was telling me this, I suddenly remembered, I had someone arrive last week. I haven't checked on Louisa. Better go and see if she's still okay. I'm glad that was not the case.
No.
And how do you do this? Is it through a professional body?
Like a dating
an app?
Website? No, you have to contact the universities and apply and have this made available. And obviously there's a screening process. But $50 cash per day, that is, considering it's tax-free, that is really very helpful.
Especially if you're already kind of catering for a family, for instance, maybe it's just adding one more person on.
Exactly. Economies of scale.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, good tip. I can see why you're excited about that one.
I've stopped dribbling now. I can relax.
Quite a mess. Okay, we are talking today about retirement. And specifically, we are looking at the myths and misconceptions about retirement. And there's a few things to get into here. And before we actually get to anything else, I just want to make one point, that this is not just for people who are retired or are about to retire or are nearing retirement, that this is a topic that flows on very neatly from our conversation last week about superannuation and our superannuation health check. It's basically the next stage of that discussion. So if you heard last week's, then you're basically primed for this week. If you haven't heard last week's, go back and have a listen to that one and then come back here.
Also, can I just point out, this episode, I have a feeling, will be particularly important for, I guess, our generation, because we're going to uncover some myths and misconceptions about retirement. And by everyone listening and hearing this, they can help look out for maybe some warning signs or risky or disturbing financial decisions of potentially their family members, their retired family members. So I feel like this is going to be educationally juicy for everyone out there right now.
That is an intriguing concept. Educationally juicy.
Yeah, okay. My brain's a little bit frazzled today. My apologies.
You're very excited about this topic. Okay, before we go too much further, we need to say that if you are listening to this today, know that anything we are talking about is general in nature. It's always general. It is never personal, investment, strategic, or product advice. It is purely for financial education purposes only.
That's right. We don't know anything about your financial goals and dreams, your risk profile, your tax situation. So please make sure that if you hear something, you take it to a financial planner and ask them questions and get them to draw up personal advice for you.
I have made a list. Canna, are you excited about this?
Tell me. Yes, I am. I'm all ears.
It is a list of myths about superannuation and I'm going to share with you them one at a time.
Can't wait.
And you can dispel. It's like Mythbusters. This is like Mythbusters for retirement, because I'm going to give you the myths and you are going to bust them. Myth number 1. Planning for retirement begins when you retire.
No. Okay. So planning for retirement, I don't care how I don't care how young you are. It starts today. And I'm going to include you in on this, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be really cheesy. Apologies in advance, but there is a very famous Warren Buffett quote, which really resonates with me right now. And I may be slightly ad-libbing this to make it fit in, but his quote is, "Someone is enjoying sitting in the shade today because that person planted a tree a long time ago." So the sooner, the better when it comes to planning for retirement. And the reason why I'm so aggressively passionate about this is the sooner you can do this, the more opportunities that you can make the most of. And you can also use all those loopholes which are going to help you leverage your superannuation and give it the biggest and best opportunity to grow and to give you that comfort and that support and that peace of mind. And that's sustainable retirement. And it's also going to mean that you're a lot more efficient, you're a lot more in control, you're making the most of things like salary sacrificing, and then, of course, compounding interest kicking in sooner rather than later. And, of course, there are all those wonderful tax advantages that come from superannuation. So, no, that is a complete load of crap. Retirement planning starts today. And even from a money mindset point of view, it is really inspiring and motivating to think, okay, I would actually like to retire at age 60 on $80,000 a year. By knowing that, you can then work backwards and start putting the steps in place today to help to the best of your ability and your available resources get to there, so that you're not having to take these ridiculous, excessive, dangerous risks in order to try and catch up for lost time. Did I go a little bit aggressive? I get a little aggressive sometimes.
You've come out hard.
Tom's pointed this out recently a lot.
Do you guys talk about superannuation a lot at home, you and Tom?
I guess when I get angry, sometimes I get really passionate, and it's the final straw that breaks the camel's back. And it takes a lot for me to kind of calm back down. But then I'm normally in this like chill zone 90% of the time. But when I'm out of my 90% zone, I can go a little bit psycho.
Does he ever engage in what I like to think of as canna baiting?
Oh, yeah. It's his favourite hobby.
Oh, great. Because it would be so easy just to kind of toss up a misconception about superannuation, or, as I often do, accidentally, I don't do this deliberately to bait you, an assumption that I have made about super or about money in general, and just watch you just go for it.
Lose it. Yes, he does this all the time. Loves doing it. And I fall for it because my brain just explodes, and I'm like, my wires just go mental, and I fall right into his trap.
That is
and then
fantastic.
He laughs at me, and then it takes me a while to calm down again.
So it's a big myth, though, isn't it? That as soon as you hear retirement, that people kind of switch off a little bit because they think that that's not happening for another 20 years or 30 years. I don't need to be thinking about it now.
Why would I bother?
Yeah, but you have talked about in the past the power of compounding interest, and it is really quite staggering to see it. And you have posted on Instagram before as well some kind of, what did you call them, charts or graphs or something? Doesn't sound very exciting, does it?
They're historical charts of the share market and the various different asset classes. But if you have a look, it's actually mind-blowing.
And so it is the greatest kind of incentive ever to just start thinking about it now.
Very much so. And I'm going to go a little bit off topic and get a little bit emotional.
Okay.
Right now, if you don't mind.
I feel like this is unusual.
We've created a safe space because I've gotten really angry at you and I've had a bit of an emotional roller coaster. I've talked about my relationship issues where, Tom baits me, I explode, lose it. But the world is expensive right now. The rising cost of living is stressful. It's overwhelming. I don't know about you, but I'm getting a little bit short-tempered, and it's really adding up. And the one thing we can do for ourselves is make small, simple, intelligent, wise decisions today with our money that are going to act as light at the end of the tunnel. So that whilst we are, working 9 to 5, sitting on the bus on the way to work, or, looking at our screens, we know that our money is working for us through our superannuation accounts, and that we have some concrete goals that we have set down intentionally, and we are proactively working on those to the best of our ability, and know that that is what is going to give us peace of mind and comfort and allow us to just take some of the stress and pressure off our shoulders. This is superannuation that everyone has and everyone is capable of working with and getting set up in the right way for them. I just
feel better.
I feel like it's a little bit of a confessional. No, it wasn't a confessional booth, but I had to let that out.
Yeah, you do. You look lighter. Like you actually look as though there is a weight lifted off you. But I think we can safely say that myth number 1, planning for retirement begins when you retire, has been busted. Would you agree?
I'm scared you're going to ask me the next question. I'm going to get equally as passionate again.
Oh, I hope so. Second myth. Myth number 2. Here we go. On retirement, you should cash in your super.
So cashing in is essentially withdrawing your superannuation money out of the superannuation environment. And I'm not laughing at that idea because I think that's potentially fraught with danger. I'm laughing at the innocence in you pretending to know what that question really is, that myth really is. But so what you are doing is then basically closing off your superannuation. You've reached preservation age, met a condition of release, you're taking, that money's been sold down to cash and you deposit it into your everyday bank account and off you go. And this is what some people do. Now, generally speaking, it's not ideal, but the reason why people may do this is something like a health condition. They need that money to pay for, medical treatment, or they have large amounts of debts that they need to clear, or they're actually apprehensive about the consistency of legislation around superannuation. They're worried, they don't trust the system, or they're worried that it may retrospectively change. They have some nervousness or anxiety around that. And
is it about having control over their own, or feeling like they'll have more control if it's sitting in their own bank account as opposed to being in the super environment, even though they still have control when it's in super?
Well, you still have control in superannuation, and particularly during a allocated pension phase. But I think really it is an element of fear. And obviously we fear what we don't understand. So really at the end of the day, it is a financial literacy gap. And I have had situations in the past with clients when they first met with me and they're like, oh, I don't trust super. The rules can change. They change it all the time. But when you sit down and explain it and they have that light bulb moment and they see how it works, they are on board with super. They understand how important it is and they need to take it seriously. And that idea that they had initially about cashing it in isn't actually desirable. So it's something that people really need to get advice on. And the reason why I say this is, according to the ABS, the average retirement age is about 56, 57, and the life expectancy today is around 81 to 86. And these are stats from the ABS. So taking 100% cash approach for your superannuation could potentially be fraught with danger because it could erode very quickly over time with inflation and the rising cost of living. And one of the, blessings in disguise of superannuation is this allocated pension system where you can draw a tax-free pension income stream from your superannuation in due course when you meet those terms and conditions. So there is an important element of sustainability that comes from staying within the superannuation ecosystem.
That all makes sense.
Well, thank you. I was worried it wouldn't, but yeah.
No, it actually does. And I had never realised how much kind of people were almost suspicious of changes. It's actually quite frightening to think that people would reach that point and be retiring and be perhaps
mistrusting
of the system when it is set up to help people live a comfortable retirement.
And if you look at the trend in the rules and regulations and caps, they have become, they are very generous and quite desirable. And of course, it's about having a consistent approach and doing a variety of different things because obviously money is trapped within super until you meet that condition of release. But there is a very good reason why I say super is sexy, because it comes with a lot of wonderful benefits that actually really help you accumulate large amounts of wealth without having to try too hard.
Okay. Busted? Can we say it's busted?
Busted big
Excellent.
time.
Assume you should cash in? Busted. Okay. We've got a few more myths to get through. We don't have a huge amount of time. So we're going to take a very quick break and we'll come back and get onto the third myth. I think you're going to like this myth. Well, you won't like it, but you'll enjoy busting it. Hannah, we are talking all about myths and misconceptions about retirement, and we've busted 2 myths so far, and I want to bust a third myth now. Myth number 3 is that retirement means a conservative risk profile. Now, can I have a go at...
You want to go busting this? Go for it. I am eager to hear. I think you can do this.
So I am assuming, I actually wasn't going to say I want to bust the myth. I was just going to try and explain the myth further and then allow you to bust it. But it feels like you've set me up to fail here. So I would understand that basically this idea that because there's no more contributions being made, the money, you're no longer paying into it. It's not in the accumulation phase anymore. That you need to take a very conservative approach to where that money is being invested within your super fund to avoid eroding too much of the money that you have saved. And therefore you would switch to a very conservative risk profile, even though you might have another 30 years left to live. Hopefully you've got 30 years left to live, maybe even more. And you may need to take a slightly different approach. Maybe conservative isn't actually right for you. Do I sound like you?
You do, actually.
Oh, I don't know whether to be scared by that or flattered or...
No, I think you nailed it. So exactly as you say, I mean, if you look at those stats from the ABS, the average retirement for someone is 24 years. Now, depending on whose definition you go with for long-term investing, some people say 5 years, some people say 10. I say 10 plus is my definition of long-term investing. And that's a long-term investment portfolio lends itself to a growth or high growth asset allocation. So we're talking 24 years. So we're talking 2.4 times that long-term definition. And I think today, with that rising cost of living, inflation, people are starting to panic because they are seeing their conservative investment portfolios erode away quite quickly. And once that erosion begins, it only happens faster. And that is when people are left with, no money and they're having to apply for the age pension and, leaning on family and friends for support. So you do need to take an educated and mindful approach when it comes to looking at your asset allocation as you approach retirement. Now, I have previously mentioned in other episodes, and I believe it's the one where we talk about the secret weapon for Australians, which is about talking about the franking credits, I believe. But I talk about this sleep well at night strategy that I have in my book, Mindful Money. And that is where I recommend my clients have 2 years worth of living expenses in cash, but the remainder amount of their money, that is their superannuation money, is still invested in alignment to what their current risk profile is, taking into consideration that they need their money to keep up with the cost of living and inflation, and also their lifestyle needs as well. So yes, you do need to slightly tweak and change your allocation of assets, but you need to be doing it carefully and thinking long term, and understand that market volatility is normal. And there are certain ways of managing that in a proactive way, but you also need to understand the importance of diversification, getting great advice, understanding the different strategies involved to help reduce that risk, and obviously the natural movement of the market and that long-term vision.
I actually wanted to ask you about the getting of advice at this point, because it feels like a really, really pivotal moment that say you are transitioning into retirement, that is the point at which you would then go and do your risk profile again, but actually get some detailed professional advice that can look at what your expectations are for the next 25 or so years and actually go, you know what, you can't just use a cookie cutter approach. We're going to need to kind of figure something out for you. But you need to get that advice at that point.
Absolutely. And there will be things that you would have never even considered that might be available for you. And they'll also, the value of sitting down talking to a financial planner is they will ask you a whole range of questions. Like, for example, do you want to downsize your home? Do you have a particular request about your estate planning? Even things like being entitled to a concession card, that may save you a fortune on public transport. But you never have actually thought about that because you've never seen a financial planner and they haven't, turn all those stones over to have a look and see what is appropriate and available to you and put together some concrete personal advice.
Okay. Retirement means conservative risk profile. Busted?
Busted.
Busted. Well and truly busted. Okay. Myth number 4. Retirement means that you'll be enjoying a cost-effective life.
That's cost-effective. Maybe a budget-friendly life? Okay, so I think what we're trying to say is people think that they don't need that much money once they retire, that they can have a simple life, go fishing, and, their cost of living is going to be different because they're not having to put a suit on every day and jump on a bus or a train or jump in the car, that their life becomes simpler.
Cost effective.
Yeah. Okay. I just realised you actually wrote that question down and I'm now insulting you.
This is the problem when I write the myths. And I thought, who better to write myths than the person who makes all of these assumptions all the time?
The highly critical, cynical, negative.
Oh, wow. That came out of nowhere and hurts. Go on. So please, I'm assuming by the fact that you've just listed all of those incorrect assumptions that it is in fact incorrect and that the costs involved while you're retired are still significant.
Just like I say to people, when you do a budget, you want to do it in a calm, quiet space so you can concentrate and see how the true cost of living really does add up. And I said to people, you need like a cup of tea or potentially a shot of vodka next to you because it is a bit of a slap in the face because you realise, wow, I thought we only spent this much money per annum to live, but actually we spend a lot more. It's the same with retirement planning. You still need to do a budget and look at what your current cost of living is and what your retirement cost of living is going to look like. And when those people say, well, I'm going to just take it easy. I mean, we'll go camping, we'll do a drive around the country. It's not going to be an extravagant lifestyle. That's great, but let's be real. Let's poke a few holes at this and really check everything is safe and secure and robust. So think about, okay, well, how often do you upgrade the car? How often do you need to upgrade things like dishwashers, white goods? Does your house need a certain amount of maintenance and repairs? Think about how many houses we see on a regular basis where there is an elderly couple living in there and the house is literally a death trap. It's falling apart. And it's quite often because they can't afford to get it fixed or they don't have the physical manpower to be able to fix it themselves. And this is where people really underplay how much money they really do need for retirement. And then there are things you need to think about for medical expenses. Is there a particular specialist that you need to see, or do you need to travel overseas for those specialists? What entitlements do you get from the government for that medicine? These are all things that are really important. And then you also need to, and this is going to sound a little bit grim, but you also need to think about, okay, well, what about retirement homes, aged care facilities? This is an area which is quite topical at the moment. It's incredibly expensive. There is, supply issue. Also, some of these accommodation aren't particularly nice, or they're not necessarily in an area that you want to live or close to family and friends. So there's lots of things you really need to look at as to what your retirement is going to be. And then, of course, insurances. If you are going to be traveling around Australia, around the world, are you insurable? And if you've got a medical condition, that can be very expensive or not actually possible. So I guess I'm saying keep it real.
And that talk of retirement homes and the like actually reminds me of what you said at the start of the episode about how this is something that you not necessarily might be thinking about for yourself, but kind of looking at family members and parents, etc., that these are kind of some red flags and some things that, hey, it's worth it. If you're having that conversation, if you know that they're kind of looking at this transition into retirement and kind of planning out for the future, that make sure that these things are on the agenda as well. Even though that sounds like a pretty kind of brutal conversation to have with your parents, that it's something that does need to be taken into account.
I had a situation with a friend, and the mother had passed away and the father was not coping so well, and they had to put him into a home, and they had to sell the family home that this gentleman was living in to pay for it, and it was incredibly expensive. And he said to me, I'm not going to get any inheritance, which is he was perfectly fine with, because all he cared about is his father's well-being and his happiness. But he said, this is an incredibly expensive exercise, and this really does take a huge dent into any wealth that will potentially be one day transferred. And for him, it didn't matter because that happiness was important. But these are conversations that we need to be having with our loved ones, with our parents, to make sure that we've got all our ducks lined up and that everyone's well-being is prioritised.
Okay, so the retirement means you'll be enjoying a cost-effective life. I mean, it's already busted because you disapproved of the language that I used, but just generally the concept as well, busted?
Yeah, busted.
Okay, good. Last one, which is really actually tied in to that one. It's kind of a sub-myth of the last myth. So it's myth 4B. Retirement means compromising on lifestyle.
Not necessarily. Because if you've invested some TLC into your superannuation and set it up correctly, use the right superannuation products, invested it in alignment to your risk profile. Isn't that right, Michael?
Yes, absolutely, like that myth that I identified earlier.
You have gotten great advice and you've contributed on a regular basis. You may retire on a greater income than what you are currently earning. And I have plenty of clients who I helped create that situation for. And it's great because they're so used to living on a certain income, but their retirement income is even bigger. They can't possibly spend it all. It's quite incredible. It was a beautiful situation to be in. So don't assume that your retirement is going to be less income than what you're currently earning. It really boils down to you, and you've got to help yourself and help your superannuation do its thing and work its magic for you. And you do that by getting started sooner rather than later, as my friend Warren Buffett quoted.
Plant that tree now so that one day you'll be sitting under its shade. A
great big oak tree with lots of shade and sipping a cocktail with the waves crashing behind you and reading a good book.
It feels like quite a mixed metaphor now, because I don't know how many oak trees are planted on the beach where the waves are crashing.
Okay, maybe a pine tree then.
Or a palm.
Palm tree. My retirement plan is to have lots of Labradors.
That does not surprise me.
I just want a house full of a Labrador, one in every colour. I know. I've got issues to work on.
The things I learn about you doing this podcast. All right, so retirement means compromising on lifestyle. Not necessarily, therefore, I think we can say that is a myth that has been busted. There we go. All right. We've covered some myths.
We have demystified superannuation debunks. Is that a word?
We've debunked the myths, we've demystified, and we've eradicated the misconceptions.
Eradicated, that sounds chemical, but yes.
Yes, whatever it takes. Okay, so the first myth, the planning for retirement begins when you retire. Not true. Planning for retirement starts today. Get some advice, and remember, as we talked about in the last episode, that there is advice available potentially within your super fund as well. It is just important to talk to somebody who can actually kind of point you in the right direction as well. But the main thing is that you start thinking about it and get active early, because the earlier you do it, the better the outcome is likely to be.
I've never had someone say to me, I really regret taking care of my superannuation.
That would be quite funny if they said that, wouldn't it? I mean, it's highly unlikely you would ever hear those kind of words together anyway, but even in these circumstances. Myth number 2, assume you should cash in. As we have learnt, that is not necessarily the case, and it all comes down to life expectancy and the fact that you could spend quite a few years in retirement, and that the superannuation ecosystem or the superannuation environment is set up for people to retire.
For their long-term financial well-being.
I feel like you just rescued me just then. You could see
I
me
could
floundering.
see your hand was like floating around like a lost bird.
Like a loss.
It's like you had it like your hand was flapping, like as in like a pathetic wave for help.
So it feels very brutal today. Myth number 3, retirement means a conservative risk profile. This idea, again, that you could be in retirement, you could still have many years of life left after you retire, and that a conservative risk profile is not necessarily the one for you, that you need to be looking into that. You need to be doing your risk profile and you need to be getting some advice. Retirement means you'll be enjoying a cost-effective life. I know, Canny, you disapproved of the language that I used there, but we busted that myth that the expenses that a younger person or a working person might have, that a lot of them are still there in retirement, and that you'll still need to be upgrading the car or paying for maintenance on the house or medical expenses, which might actually increase. And then those longer-term conversations about retirement homes, that they are all potentially very expensive. And so this idea of a cost-effective life in retirement could potentially be a myth. And finally, that retirement means compromising on lifestyle, hopefully very much a myth. And that if you take care of your money and if you're engaged and involved in that process all the way along, then hopefully there'll be no compromise at all.
Can I add one other little special thing in there?
Oh, a bonus myth?
If you have paid attention to your superannuation and you can enjoy a long and luxurious retirement, you're also going to have, most likely surplus cash flow that you can then donate to charity or give to your own family members to help them in life. And because you're around to witness it, you get to see how it helps alleviate the stress and pressures on them, rather than your family having to wait for you to kick the bucket, so to speak, and get their inheritance then. Like, there's something that I really want to make sure, well, there's something that Tom and I are really passionate about. We would love to, in due course, help our friends and family out. And we want to be there to witness the smiles on their face and the sense of relief and the healthier lifestyle choices that they can make, because we're able, in a situation where we can afford to do that because we've been wise, smart and sensible with our superannuation money.
That's a very, very noble, good goal. I love that.
Thank you. I'm really passionate about it.
It feels like we're ending on a very positive note after some quite savage moments during this podcast. I like that. Now, how do we find you if we need more information?
The best place to get in contact with me is send me a DM on Instagram at SugarMamaTV.
Excellent. And you can hear me every day with Sean Aylmer on Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. Thank you very much for listening to How Do They Afford That? Remember to hit follow on the podcast and leave us a review too. Next week is one not to be missed if you are interested in investing. We are talking about micro investing. This came up a few weeks ago and it sparked, surprise, surprise, a very passionate reaction from Canna. And so next week we're going to explore that passionate reaction.
I'm even getting feisty at just the thought of this topic.
You actually look quite angry. I'm excited to see where this goes. Don't miss it.